everybody. Hello, Cardo. Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you guys. Let me pull this down here so it doesn't look like I am looking up. All right. So we start off with a question from Cardo. He says, "Hi, Eddie. I've just made a mouthpiece change a couple of days ago. I've been on a Bach 10.5C for a while, and now I went to a Stork 3C. Everything seems to be better except endurance. Sound, intonation, and articulation seem better now. How long will it take me to get my endurance back?" Now, the first thing I would say is to change how you're thinking about that. Your endurance did not go away. You have the same endurance that you had before you played on that mouthpiece. It's just that that mouthpiece takes more endurance. Okay? So you have to build your strength beyond what you had in the past. That's a better way to think about it. One of the problems with the 10.5C is that it takes it out of all the mouthpiece sizes, I think, especially if it's an 10.5C EW extra wide, a lot of people play on that because it gives them more endurance. And what that really means is that mouthpiece requires less endurance. It requires less strength. And that's a much better way to think of it. Just in case you or anyone else watching this hasn't heard me talk about this before, because this subject comes up a lot. In my past, I've seen people, even professionals, I've seen professionals come to the gig. They have either a new mouthpiece or a new horn. It sounds wonderful. They play wonderful, but they don't have any endurance. Next time I see them, they don't have that horn or that mouthpiece anymore. And I'm not saying this happens every time, but I've seen it often enough. And I say, "Hey, man, what happened to that horn, or what happened to that mouthpiece?" And he says, "Oh, well, I couldn't play it. I didn't have the endurance for it," or something along those lines, right? And to me, the way I see endurance, I would rather challenge myself with a horn or an instrument that requires more endurance, because that's the one thing in all this trumpet stuff, that's the one thing we can always improve, as long as we have a muscular embouchure. Now, the caveat here is, if you do not have a muscular embouchure, then you need to do whatever mouthpiece gives you the most endurance, because your idea of endurance, if you don't have a muscular embouchure, is not muscular. So we have to clarify that here. If you're using an embouchure that uses lip pressure, mouthpiece pressure, or twisting and stuff like that, if that's how you play, then you're not going to get more endurance ever on this mouthpiece. But assuming that you do have a muscular embouchure, and how do you know if you have a muscular embouchure? You have muscle underneath the mouthpiece. You have a flexed orbicularis oris underneath the mouthpiece. You have, another way to say it is that you have cushion between the mouthpiece and your teeth. It's not just sitting on skin. If you have an embouchure that has meat underneath the mouthpiece, then you have a muscular embouchure. I actually did a teaching, I'm going to call them now teaching videos. I actually did a teaching video on this, on how to breathe, and we talked about trumpet players who play on what they call a spread embouchure. And that, I'm hoping that'll come out next week. I finally got all my equipment set up so that this stuff is working the way I want it to work now. That's why I haven't been putting up any teaching videos lately, is because Now I'm now recording against that wall again. That's where I used to record. I took all the paintings and all that stuff down. Um, and so yeah, now I am back to making some of those teaching videos, and that's the one that came up first is doing what I call it the breathing uh, breathing steps, trumpet breathing process, something like that. I don't remember what I called it. Um, anyway, so yes, if you have a muscular embouchure, then you're looking at about 2 weeks to a month. As long as you don't do anything wrong at this point. What do I mean by do anything wrong? Like trying to play too many high notes for too long, forcing you to change your embouchure to get those notes. You want to spend time on the notes that you can play. If that means backing down on a lower routine, a lower high limit, then that's fine for a while until you pick up the strength again to, well, not okay, I just broke my own rule. Not pick up the strength again, but pick up the greater strength that you need to play that one mouthpiece. Now, let me also say this in this context. If you find in uh, a loud situation that you're just blowing too hard all the time, you might want to go with your Stork 3C, a Stork 3D or a 3E to go with it. And that could be your loud mouthpiece. I don't change mouthpiece for how high it goes. I change mouthpiece for how loud the ensemble is, because when the ensemble becomes louder, we need to have more bright overtones in our sound, and the shallow mouthpiece gives us those bright overtones. And when we have those bright overtones, we can hear ourselves and we don't have to blow so hard, and that helps us bring the I guess the dynamics down so that we don't tax our endurance as much. It's also an important part of uh, playing in an ensemble is having the appropriate equipment. If you're playing a high part and having to project with a C cup, now some people can project nicely with a C cup. I really think that depends on the player. So, but that's something to keep in mind is if you add to your arsenal a 3D or a 3E to give the same rim size but a more shallow cup, that will help with the endurance issues if we're talking about playing in a loud ensemble. I do not practice on those mouthpieces because I can't stand how it sounds without the loudness behind it. It sounds awful. All right, so I don't practice on that. I only use those mouthpieces for the gigs. And lately, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be like this, but lately I haven't even been using those mouthpieces because I just like the way it sounds. And if you've got a microphone, but yeah, there's still times when I would probably still do that. Gabriel says, hey, hello, Eddie and friends. Hello, nice to see you. Nice intro. Well, thank you. I was inspired on that intro. I was basically outlining the jazz song called Caravan, but taking it harmonically to a different level. Hello, T. Purdock. He says, hey, hi, everyone. Hello, nice to see you. Gabriel says, Eddie, I have issues playing low tones with my old rotary. Do you think it depends from a different pipe in the rotary? I feel them like out of tune while the pistons are okay. Or they are okay. That's something I would have to actually hear and see to answer that. Um, it is possible to have a mouthpiece uh, mismatch. Like if your mouthpiece, and you talked about how you don't play on the right mouthpiece for that instrument, that could actually be what's causing that problem. Now, there's an easy way to check. Put the right mouthpiece in there and see if it still does that. So, but that's the kind of thing that an improper mouthpiece can cause to happen. Okay? That's the kind of thing that can happen with the improper mouthpiece. So what you want to do is check with every mouthpiece that you have that'll fit into the horn, and see if it's the same on everyone. Let me give you a similar story, right? I struggle, and we might have talked about this before. I struggle on the pedal tones. Maybe not so much on this trumpet. So I'm fine until we get close to low C, right? So like playing just F, that's not a problem. Except for today. I just didn't warm up today. A lot of times on Fridays, I don't get warmed up until the afternoon. But you see how I'm when I say I struggle with the pedal tones, it's like that. Now, it's normally not on that note. Normally, it's on the low D, the low C sharp, the low C natural. I had to change embouchure to get that. Maybe now let's get the other horn and see if maybe, because I don't practice on that horn much. And let's see how that works. Oh, it pops right out. So obviously, this horn is a problem with that pedal note. Either that or I just got warmed up real quick. Let's try this again to see if I'm right. It's still harder on this horn. Now let's switch mouthpieces. All of a sudden, on this horn, I can play that low F. Now let's put this mouthpiece on this horn and try the low F. No problem there. Okay, now just to make sure, let's now go back to this horn because I might be warmed up now. Okay, now that I'm warmed up, because and let's do now the pedal C. I can't get it, right? Now, if I put this mouthpiece on this horn, well, that demonstrates nothing, does it? I'm having trouble on both instruments. So I'm convinced that certain combinations make those pedal tones more difficult. To demonstrate that, let's get one more horn. All right, so let's do this. And the reason I'm doing this is because the fundamental note comes out on a flugelhorn, right? Now I'm playing on a slightly different embouchure. Okay, so what I'm trying to demonstrate is that I can't play the pedals as well as I like. Now, when I'm warmed up, I can play the pedals better. My experience has been on certain horns, it's harder. On certain mouthpiece combinations, it's harder. And you can take that and apply that now to just what's lower notes. I hope that makes sense. I'm one of the very few. Well, I'll bet $5 because people think differently from the way I think. There are very few people that would ever demonstrate live, especially live, and then leave the video up later, demonstrate that they struggle with the pedal tones. I don't believe that being a master of pedal tones makes you a master of trumpet. And what I was saying here, the reason I brought this up is because I actually prefer a horn that does not make the pedal tones easy. I prefer a horn mouthpiece combination that makes it not easy, makes it more difficult. Because it gives me something to struggle with. I have had horns where when I go for that low C, it pops right out. And I like the fact that on these instruments and the combinations that I have, that I actually have to work for that. So when you know that there's pedal tones in my long tone studies, and I have pedal tones later after the lip slurs. By the time I get to the end of my pedal tones, 2/3 of the way through the routine, 3/4 of the way through the routine, I can play pedal tones like anybody else. I just have to struggle through that first. I can't just pick up the horn and play like I just tried to do now. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. Javier says, hello, Eddie and friends. I hope you are doing well. Yes, I am. Thank you. What approach would you take to record your own version of a jazz song? Do you write your solos before? How do you prepare? Okay, so we would call that an arrangement, right? And the first thing I do when I do an arrangement of a tune is I consider whether or not I'm going to do any substitute harmonies, right? I'm actually doing this with a tune that I learned right now. I relearned. Actually, shouldn't say relearned. I've been playing this tune my whole life and never sat down to learn it. So I sat down and really did a deep dive into the song Tune Up. A deep dive. I transcribed Sonny Stitt's solo. Had it memorized at one point. I don't think I have it memorized now. In my opinion, that's the best tune-up solo out there. So I transcribed his solo and memorized it. I wrote, I think, 3 or 4 etudes over the changes, and then now at the end of this, I'm writing an arrangement of that tune. And the question I'm asking myself is, are there any places in there that I would like to do any substitutions? I've been struggling with it for 2 weeks now, and I'm not sure I want to do any substitutions because that, when there's a general rule here, and this applies to your question. There's a general rule. If you're going to do an arrangement, you should never do an arrangement just to do an arrangement. There should be always something that makes it, according to you, better than the original. If you can't improve on it, don't do the arrangement, because a lot of people that write terrible arrangements. Now, to write an arrangement just to get the practice of writing arrangement, that's one thing. That's educational. I'm not saying don't do that. But for performance purposes, there's a lot of people that write arrangements that are actually less interesting, less expressive, and it becomes just a exercise in showing off your writing skills. And it's not musical. It doesn't improve the piece at all. So my rule for an arrangement is I want to take the arrangement and somehow do something that makes it a little bit more valuable. So in the context of doing substitutions, that the substitution should only be used if it enhances the value of the song. So but that's my first step is, am I going to use substitutions? So in this one, I'm deciding, no, I'm not going to use the substitutions. I'm pretty much decided that. I might use some substitutions in the intro. We'll get to that in a second. But for now, the rest of the head, no, we're not going to use substitutions. The previous tune I worked on, I had lots of substitutions because I believe that enhanced the tune. Now, when I first said this about enhancing, I said for you, because not everybody values the same thing. So when we do this enhancement, it has to be something that for you enhances the tune and makes it better. That can be a simplification. It can be something that makes it a little bit more elaborate. But it has to be something that gives the song value. The second thing I look at if I'm doing an arrangement is the form. Now, in form, what we're talking about in jazz is what happens when. So form includes, am I going to have an intro? Who's going to play the head? Is there going to be an interlude? So between solos and between the head and the solos, is there going to be an ensemble section that goes between? And now, writing solos, I'm not sure if you mean writing the notes of the solos. I wouldn't do that for an arrangement, I don't think. Unless you're doing it as like as a like a suggested practice thing, you know. But anyway, that's the next thing I would do is look at the form. Is it going to have an ending? How is the piece going to end? That's the next stuff I would look at. Then after that, I would then write out the parts for each of the individual instruments. Now, if you're not reading music, if the guys in the band are not reading, then you would work that out in the rehearsals. You can't have a rehearsal. I mean, you can't have a arrangement of a song with people that don't read if you don't rehearse. So you get together, you talk it out, and you say, hey, let's do this as an intro. Let's do this on the head. You play the head, I'll play the head, stuff like that. Then you discuss what happens after that. And you discuss how you come to an ending. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. But that's how I approach writing an arrangement. Cardo says, thanks a lot. You're welcome. All right. Gabrielle says, unfortunately, I can't switch the position of piston mouthpiece on the rotary, as the rotary should be played with its mouthpiece that is deeper and have larger bore, or the sound is not a rotary sound. Yes, but I thought you told me in previous weeks. I thought you told me in previous weeks that you were playing on a trumpet mouthpiece, a piston mouthpiece, instead of a rotary mouthpiece. Maybe I misunderstood what you said. T. Purdock says, hello, Eddie. Hello. Could you explain how to make a fluffy and velvety sound with lots of air in it? Yes, normally that fluffy, velvety sound is from mic placement. Most of the time, it's from mic placement. Everybody has that velvety, fluffy sound. It's just that nobody hears it because we don't put our bell up to people's ears. Let's demonstrate it. I won't be able to hear what you hear, but let's demonstrate it. I'll point away from the mic. Okay, now I'm going to back up. Now, like I said, I don't know what you guys can hear. I'm not hearing what you're hearing, and it's quite possible that it just distorted because I was playing into the microphone. But what I would have expected to hear if it didn't distort is a bunch of that fuzz in the sound. So most of what people mean when they say that they have a favorite album that they listen to and it's got all that earthiness in it. That earthiness comes from the mic placement. The closer you get to the mic, the more of that fuzzy stuff is in there. So yeah, most people and I remember one time a friend of mine was struggling with his lead sound. He was doing some home recordings like what I do, but he couldn't get his lead trumpet sound to brighten up. And I asked him how close he was to the mic, and he says he's right there. If you're playing lead in a recording session, you don't want to be right on the microphone. You want to back off, because the tone becomes brighter the farther away you get from the bell. Gabriel says, I'll check with other rotary pieces. Thanks, Eddie. You're welcome. Javier says, I also struggle with pedals, but I don't think they are that important as everybody says. Well, I'll tell you what, it's not everybody. There's some people that say stay away from that stuff. And I make it clear in my books that if you're not a pedal tone player, don't play the pedal tones. There are some people that shouldn't even be playing them. Gabriel says, by the way, I was not talking of pedals. Oh, yeah, I knew that. Just know some of the stuff. But what my point was is if it works that way for me on the pedals, then it's the same concept for the lower notes. You can have equipment problems that will make the lower notes more difficult. Now, let's say that's not what it is. Let's rule that out. The next question I would ask is, do you have the same problem? See, I was assuming that when you said that this is a problem you only have on the rotary trumpet and not on the piston trumpet. If that's true, then you have information to work with there. Anthony says, hi, hope you're okay. Yes, I am. Thank you. Do you know how to soundproof a room for trumpet? Pearl and I have been looking at sound I forget what they call them, sound panels or something like that. And she's been looking at building them from recycled materials. They would go against this wall. So, but you can buy the sound panels. Does that make sense? You can buy sound panels and you just glue them onto the wall. Now, if you don't want anything permanent, then what you do is you find some way to put curtains or a tapestry or a you can put blankets on the wall. What I've thought about in my head for something that's not permanent is you take a blanket and you make a frame out of PVC. I like making stuff with PVC. I don't do enough of it, but I've done stuff like that out in the backyard. But I can just see like a PVC, uh, like rectangular frame that you put a blanket over and lean that up against the wall, and you do that for each of the walls so that the sound doesn't penetrate as much. And I would also put underneath at the crack of the door. Let me grab this. I have my wife made this for me. You know, in the old days, people had these to keep drafts out of the room. This is I guess they call it a door snake. It's got sand inside of it. My wife made it. Now, she likes to make stuff. Oh, it's got a hole in it. She likes to make stuff out of recycled materials. And when we go for our walks in the morning, if someone has a lot of times someone will throw out a whole box of clothing, right? And we'll come back with the car later and pick up that box of clothing because you can take the fabric and make stuff with that fabric. And that's what this is. You'll notice that there's a seam right here. She took two parts of material, sewed them together, and then rolled them, filled them with sand. And so we have this door snake, I think is what it's called, a door snake to put on the front door. And yes, it helps keep the sound in and out, but it also keeps the draft. I won't go into that. But, you know, for me, the draft is a big problem because it brings your electric bill up. But also, we live in an area where there's snakes. I've seen in my yard, believe it or not, I've seen in my yard water moccasins. They call them water moccasins or cottonmouths. If I'm not mistaken, these are snakes that are more venomous than regular rattlesnakes. So the last thing I want is for them to just creep into my house. And the hole underneath my door is big enough that they can do that. So, but yes, you can do that to help. You can put one of those snakes down to keep the sound from going under the door too. But that's what I know about soundproofing. The reason we've been looking at soundproofing in this room is because I do my recordings here, and I have to, if someone's mowing the grass outside, I have to stop. If there's a guy next door that has a car that has a loud muffler, and if he's sitting in the street in his car with the engine idling, I can't record because it gets through the microphone. Gabriel says, maybe I open too much the lower lip when playing low and I lose focus on those notes. That's possible. That's always possible. But the question I have, Gabriel, is does it happen on all the instruments? If you don't have that problem on other instruments, then it is an instrument situation. Anthony says, finally made it. Am I late? I don't know how long that's been there, so I don't know. We start at 1:30 nowadays, Anthony. Javier says, yeah, it answers it. Thank you. Okay, you're welcome. Gabriel says, the sound when you were on the side was much better, in my opinion. Yeah, see, well, that's what I'm saying. It's for me, the different sound is different tools for different jobs, right? That what some people would call smoky sound is appropriate for different kinds of music. You would not use that for classical music. You would not do that. T. Purdock says, oh, yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you. All right. I'm sure he's talking about the smoky sound. Javier says, I guess pedal can also damage your playing. In some cases, it's not always win-win. Well, it can. The worst case scenario with the pedals is if we talked earlier about not having a muscular embouchure. If you do not have a muscular embouchure, then you should not be playing pedals ever. And when I talk about that, I don't think that it's wrong to not have a muscular embouchure. I never said that. And a lot of people interpret what I say that way, and that's not what I'm saying. There are some famous, very successful players that play on a spread embouchure. And the best example, because he does it so blatantly, is John Faddis. Nobody's going to tell me that John Faddis isn't a good player. He's one of the world's best trumpet players. And he plays like that. You can see him. He puts the horn up and then goes. He pulls the lips all the way out of the mouthpiece and plays like that. So he plays on a spread embouchure. So it's not wrong. I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend people playing that way. But if a student comes to me with that kind of embouchure, I'm not going to try to change their embouchure unless they want to change it for whatever reason they have. Maybe they're having issues with the sound or intonation or whatever, and they think that a different embouchure might help. Then we'll take a look at it. Remember, my teaching method is not thou shalt do my way at all times. That's not how I teach. I'm here to help you get where you want to go. And if you don't want to do an embouchure change, we're not going to do an embouchure change. We'll find some way to make what you're doing work. Now, there are some times when what the student wants is not going to happen without an embouchure change. Then we have to do the embouchure change. And I've changed, I want to say, at least 100 trumpet students' embouchures so far in my career. Now, that's 100 over a course of 40 years. I've been teaching now 42 years. Woohoo! Gabriel says, it's the Yamaha 15E4 that I'm using now, and it's okay except for the low tones. I don't struggle to play then, but they look like strange and out of focus. So if I'm not, okay, so the E15E4. Okay, that sounds fine. Anthony says, thank you, Eddie. My friend loaned me a Yamaha Silent Mute, but I hated it. Glad I didn't buy one. Yeah, I haven't even tried it. And I would much rather, you guys know that I don't practice when I travel, right? I would much rather If I do have to practice, I would much rather play soft enough that nobody can hear it than to put one of those mutes in. Really. Oh, I did skip. I wonder if I skipped some other stuff. Gabriel says you skipped the part where I thank you to have suggested me to change mouthpiece. Well, I apologize. I'm checking here to see. Okay, I think I see it. I hope I didn't. If I skipped anybody else's, just let me know. So I'm kind of confused. You say you asked me about last week. So, oh, talking about the the mouthpiece. Yes, I asked you um because I thought you said either it was last week or the week before. I thought you said that you were using a piston mouthpiece on a rotary trumpet. So I'm anyway. Any other questions? Let me look on the website, make sure there's nothing there. And emails and stuff. Oh, it looks like there is one. Ooh, I almost missed it. Yeah, look at that. This is from John. John says, "Hi Eddie. After completing a scale expansion and then working on the tonalization of that key, i.e., 20 patterns over a number of days, I probably do the first 8 or 12 tonalization patterns in a day and then move on to complete the patterns over the next day or two, which I think is down to endurance issues I have. In reality, I do not think I am memorizing the patterns, but it is helping me to hear and play the different patterns notes through repetition." That's right. In the scenario above, should I play each pattern 10 times to memorize them before going to the next pattern? Your thoughts, please. John from Ireland. Um, no, do not do the 10 times thing. There's no reason to do that. Just keep doing what you're doing, and you will have. Let me approve this real quick. Keep doing what you are doing, and you will have that endurance, and you will have that ear training. So that thing that you noticed about the ear training, exactly, you're saying exactly what I've been saying. That when I do my list of the benefits of doing the tonalization studies, one of the things I put on that list is ear training. And I've had students do the entire tonalization book by memory, the whole book. They're not allowed to look at it once. And I'm not sure why I stopped doing that. But yes, and the students, when I tell them, hey, you're going to play this by memory, then they look at me like I'm nuts because it's like 50, 60 pages long. And how are they going to play that by memory? But they're not actually playing it by memory, they're playing it by ear. And if they are playing it by ear, what's that tell you about improvisation? What's that tell you about sight reading? What's that tell you about all this stuff that goes along with tonal centers, right? So yes, it's an amazing thing that happens with those patterns. Those patterns done in that order help you so much to hear the key. It's just amazing. I'm not taking any credit for it. It's, I pulled all these pieces together to make that system, but I didn't invent anything. All I did was create the system. All those scales that were already in existence, um, it's just the way that we do it has more benefits. I'm going to tell you, I haven't told a lot of people, but um, there's a saxophone book that I merged with the concept of this saxophone book by Trent Kynaston. I don't know if I'm saying his last name correctly. Um, Back in the 80s, when I put my system together, I was really leaning towards his book. His book was the original tonalization study book because what I liked about his, now, if you know that saxophone, the lowest note is B flat. When you look at his scale studies, they all went down to low B flat or B natural or C, depending on what the scale was, and then up to the highest note on the saxophone. You know, figuratively speaking. Well, I said, why shouldn't I not be doing that on the trumpet? So I applied, instead of going down to low B flat, I started going down to low notes, F sharp or G or A flat or whatever. And yes, so I didn't make that up. But he didn't recommend doing all of the ones in one key at one time. So I took a lot of different stuff and put it together to make that system. But yes, that system is so extremely powerful and extremely beneficial. If any of you guys that are watching this don't know about that, I strongly recommend you checking out my tonalization stuff. There's videos for it. We've got different books based on different range. So yeah. I did skip Javier. He said leprosy lip. I don't know what that's in what context that is. That would be awful. Gabriel says, Eddie, what do you think about increasing airspeed when playing high? Okay, so that kind of talk. So there's a lot of people out there today that say don't talk about airspeed, right? Because it's not true. It's not true. The air doesn't go faster. There's not more air. It's not more air, right? Because it's not true. And I want to ask, what is the purpose of saying that? I'm convinced that the purpose of them saying that is just so that they can show everybody how smart they are. There are things that we do and we say that are not true, but still beneficial. If you think of high notes having faster air and that makes you play better, why should you not think that way? Whether it's true or not true. So the bottom line is, because it's not true, then it does become a mental exercise. And if the mental exercise works for you, then you use it. If it doesn't work for you, then you don't use it. Now, when we talk about faster air, and I did this because that's the proverbial thumb over the hose pipe, right? When we talk about faster air in the context of resistance, now we can speak in truth. Because if you raise your tongue arch for the higher notes, the air is now going to go faster because that's how that works. But you don't put faster air from here. Now, if that's how you have to think about it to get the notes to play right, I don't have a problem with that. I don't believe that everything we think should be true. I know that's weird, right? Because I do consider myself an intellectual. But there's something on the other side of the intellect. If thinking of things certain ways produces good results, why should we not continue to think that way? I like to think of stuff like that when we talk about faster air, slower air. colder air, warmer air. When we talk about stuff like that, I think of those things as visualizations. Visualize it as faster air. If you can visualize it as faster air and it gives you the results you're looking for, then yes, continue to do that. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. What matters is that you got the result that you were looking for. There's so much trumpet pedagogy. I'm never sure I'm saying that word correctly. Trumpet pedagogy. There's so much trumpet pedagogy that's just not true. So what? There's so many people out there that feel like it's their job to tell you that what you believe is not true, that how you're doing it is not true, it's not based on truth. The bottom line is, are you getting the results that you need to get? And I've seen if you take all of that mental stuff away, if you take all of that mental stuff away from the people just because it's not true, you're going to leave them with nothing left. I think we have a responsibility to pursue truth, but when it comes to getting the job done, there's nothing wrong with thinking of things a certain way. If thinking this way gives you that result and that's the result you want, then you should continue to think that way, whether it's based on truth or not. I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds crazy. But there's certain things certain ways that we think that create the right mechanisms, that create the right body movements, create the right flow in the music. And if we can think that way, whether it's true or not, it's going to make a positive difference. It'll have a positive impact on your music. Javier says, I used to play on a swollen lip and I changed to a muscular because of your system. I used to warm up a lot because I had to wait till the lip got swollen. Yep. Uh-huh. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with playing that way. I would not recommend a beginner playing that way, but sometimes I do play that way. But it's in my opinion, there's all kinds of good stuff available to the muscular players that is not available to the swollen players. And in fact, it's a whole different instrument. It really is literally an entirely different instrument to play. T. Purdock says, I heard that some people practice whisper tones. What is that exactly? Okay, in my opinion, a whisper tone is so soft that it almost doesn't make a sound. I'll see if I can do this. So I had it for a split second right there. Those notes that are coming out at the beginning, those aren't whisper tones. That's just a pianissimo. I think there's benefit to trying to get this. I think the discovery process that's involved in just being able to do a whisper tone, playing so soft that the now I don't want to get into that, but yeah, you're so soft that the let's put it this way. Um the trumpet wave is a reverse ramp. And that's because of the way the mouthpiece, the way the lips function, right? It's a reverse ramp wave. I believe when you play whisper tones, it changes to a sine wave and it has a different tone quality. And I'm just barely touching on it right there. Now, the beauty of trying to do a whisper tone is that it will reveal every flaw in your embouchure. It was in doing the whisper tones that made me realize I can't put my horn straight. I have to have my horn off to the side because the note won't even come out unless I have equal pressure on both sides. And since I play off to the side, that means that the horn has to be at a 10-degree angle from the front of my face. I got a little bit too much fuzz in my sound today to do that. But yes, there is benefit to trying to do that. Also, this is T. Purdock again. Also, what are the pros and cons of playing on a big mouthpiece? There's no pros and cons to playing on a big mouthpiece. If you're playing, let's look at this. One of my sayings, one of my isms is that all physical work should be done on the trumpet for musical reasons. And physical stuff includes your equipment. There are no other reasons to play on big equipment other than it's going to make your music better. If it doesn't make your music better, you shouldn't be playing on big equipment. Okay? So, it is not true that bigger mouthpieces give you this and smaller mouthpieces give you that. Now, what is true is talking about the shallowness of the mouthpiece. That when we talk about big or small, we're not talking about how shallow it is. So, like up on the chat earlier in the video, we were talking about playing on the same rim size but on a shallower mouthpiece. That's not what we're talking about. When you say bigger, you're talking about instead of a 3, you're going to play on a 2 or a 1. That's what we mean by bigger. And there is no benefit to playing on a bigger mouthpiece. Now, when does it look like it's going to be a benefit? Is when you were playing on a mouthpiece that was too small for you. If you play on a mouthpiece that's too small and you pick up a mouthpiece that's bigger than that, closer to what's natural for you, it's going to sound like, hey, the bigger mouthpiece made a difference. That doesn't mean that everybody should play on a bigger mouthpiece because everyone's going to play better on a bigger mouthpiece. No, it's not like that. You need to find the mouthpiece that fits your trumpet playing. And there is no benefit to playing bigger than what's right for you, and there's no benefit for playing smaller than what's right for you. It just doesn't work like that. I know there's a bunch of trumpet lore out there that says that's how it works. Now, that lore is backed up by the fact that some people will go from a smaller one to a bigger one and they have the benefits of that. That's like someone running in a shoe that's a size or two too small, and they finally get shoes that fit their feet, and they say, oh, this is great. Well, it's great because now finally you've got shoes that fit, right? So no, what the idea for mouthpieces is to find what fits your needs. You don't go bigger because you want this and smaller because you want that. No, you find the mouthpiece that fits your needs. Anthony says, Eddie, thank you for your help. Was nice to see you. Yes, nice to see you too. Gabriel says, that's why I skipped on the larger as it sounded much better. You encouraged me to use the one with the better sound and to work on endurance. And now it's much better. That's wonderful. Yeah. You know, I think when you do get the right size for you, that's the one that's going to give you the best sound. So that's one way you can know if you've got the right size. The right size mouthpiece is going to give you the better sound. All right, so we are officially out of time. We can take another question or two before we sign off. Anybody have some a last question or two last questions? Gabriel says, I have some, but they are long. I'll do next time. Okay, that's fine. Anybody else? All right. Well, it's always great to see you guys. Thank you. T Paradox says, thank you very much. You're welcome. Gabriel says, thanks for everything. Have a nice weekend. You too. Goodbye, Maestro. Goodbye, friends. Okay. Well, with that, we'll say God bless you guys, and we'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.